pastor friend of mine in Buffalo, New York, has written a book which defines the difference between self-concern and the greater concern. What matters to me versus what matters to God. What is my need versus what is God's plan. And in it, he suggests a theory. The theory that everybody needs a villain. What's the bad guy in your life? What is the evil system or power of corruption? Who is your Darth Vader? Your Thanos? Your Dr. Doofenshmirtz? Who's your Galactic Empire? Your Pan Am? Your Microsoft? We all want something to work against so that we have something to be aiming for. But the effectiveness of your aim depends on the strength of your villain. Track me on this. If there's something in my life that's my villain, something that I find is wrong, then I'm going to work against it, and that's going to be my aim. It's going to be my focus. I'm going to work against this. But my aim will then depend on the strength of my villain. If my villain is just something that comes against my personal self-concern, if my villain is something that comes against what makes me comfortable or what I prefer personally, then the aim of my life, my focus, the purpose of my life will also only have to do with my self-concern. If my bad guy is what makes me comfortable, it comes against what makes me comfortable, then my purpose in life is simply to make myself comfortable. So let me be clear. COVID-19 is not your villain. Your villain is not grumpy people making political posts on Facebook. Your villain is not the governor. Your villain is not your financial situation. So who is your villain? Who is your villain? Jesus has a name for the villain. He calls him thief in John chapter 10, verse 10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they might have life, and to have it abundantly. The problem of COVID is not just that people die, but the real problem of COVID is that people die without knowing Jesus Christ. The problem with stay-at-home orders is not that you have nothing to do, or even not that you don't have work, but that some people get caught up in loneliness and depression and have nowhere else to turn. The problem with social strife is that we have stripped the love of Jesus right out of it. And whether you have a problem with the governor or the president elect, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, and against the cosmic powers over this present darkness. Mind you, the rulers and the authorities and the cosmic powers are referring to spiritual things, not people and powers in this world, but the spiritual powers that come against this world over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. The true villain, the enemy, the devil loves nothing more than when you don't recognize him and when you put the blame on everything else and only cling on to what affects you personally. Like in the Keith Green song, the devil says, "My job keeps getting easier because no one believes in me anymore." The villain who comes to steal and kill and destroy wants to convince you that your cause is the most important one. And that's why we grumble and dispute and rebel and complain. But Jesus didn't consider his own equality with God something to be held onto. His focus was the greater purpose of God to save you and to save me and to transform us into more than we could ever have hoped or asked. In our humility, in our emulation of Christ's humility, what do we need to let go of? If Jesus can let go of his godhood, if he can let go of his position in heaven, of his equality with God, what can you let go of? We can no longer aim at our own needs. We need to aim for the higher purpose that God has called us to. We have, after all, been raised with Christ. So set your heart on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died. And your life is now hidden with Christ in God. His purpose should be our purpose. His purpose should be the aim of our lives. So my villain is no longer what makes me uncomfortable or what makes my life difficult. The villain is the villain who wants to steal and kill and destroy, who wants to send people into hell. And it is on us to look at and to consider, how do we touch lives in the midst of COVID, in the midst of political strife, in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of loneliness, in spite of all the things that are coming at us and at our neighbors and in our society. How do we reach out and touch people for the greater purpose, which is salvation in Jesus Christ? That is the do that comes from the be of being saved. That is aiming at heaven. It is aiming all the way up. It is aiming high.